The text came in at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know because I was in a budget meeting, arguing about Q3 marketing spend, and my phone lit up face down on the polished conference table with a vibration that felt like a minor seismic event in my chest. I knew it was him. Only my brother, Leo, texted during the workday with the urgency of a teenager. When the meeting broke, I flipped it over. Leo, hey Liv. So, big weekend. Just wanted to say, don't worry about coming to the wedding if it's too much. It's super formal, black tie. You know how Mia's family is. Might not be your scene. No hard feelings, okay? I read it. Then I read it again. The words rearranged themselves into sharper, clearer shapes. Don't worry about coming. Not your scene. No hard feelings. The air in the sleek, glass-walled room turned to syrup. I couldn't swallow. My vision tunneled to the screen. No hard feelings? $86,423. That's what his wedding had cost me. Not my parents. Not me as fancy, old-money family from Greenwich. Me. Olivia Chun, 34, Senior Finance Director, Human Checkbook. It started a year and a half ago. The call from my mother. Her voice a symphony of thrilled anxiety. Livy, honey. Leo proposed. On a hot air balloon. Can you believe it? Mia said yes. Of course she did. That's great, Mom. I'd said, genuine happiness for my baby brother bubbling up. He was 27, a charming, perpetually almost successful musician who wrote jingles for local car dealerships and had the artistic temperament of a Renaissance prince without the talent to back it up. Mia was a sweet, somewhat vapid socialite he'd met while playing guitar at a charity gala. She adored him, and he adored being adored. The thing is, Mom's voice dropped to a confidential whisper. Mia's parents, the Harringtons, they have certain expectations. And your father and I, well, you know the bakery is just keeping afloat. And Leo, he's an artist. The unspoken conclusion hung in the air, as familiar as my own reflection. And you, Olivia, you are stable. You are solvent. You are the solution. I was the firstborn, the one who got a full-ride scholarship to state school, who studied accounting while working 30 hours a week, who climbed the corporate ladder in sensible heels. My parents had poured every spare dollar and every ounce of emotional energy into Leo. His music lessons, his therapist bills for performance anxiety, his ill-fated stint at Berkeley that he dropped out of after a year. I was the easy child, which in our family lexicon meant the child whose needs are optional. What kind of expectations? I'd asked, already feeling the weight settle on my shoulders. It was a bottomless pit of expectation. The Harringtons envisioned a weekend-long celebration at a historic estate in the Hudson Valley. Black tie welcome dinner. A ceremony in a bespoke glass chapel they'd have to erect on the grounds. A reception for 300 in a clear-top tent with imported flowers, a 12-piece orchestra, and a menu that included things like deconstructed heirloom beef tartare. An after-party with a celebrity DJ Mia, kind of new. My parents' entire life savings could have covered the valet parking. We just don't want to embarrass Leo, my dad said on a joint call, his voice heavy with shame. In front of her people. This is his chance, Liv, to really belong somewhere nice. The guilt trip was masterful. It wasn't about a party. It was about my brother's social standing, his future, his happiness. My role was clear, fund his fairy tale. And I did. Because I loved him. Because I was conditioned to. Because the alternative was watching my parents have nervous breakdowns and being branded the selfish daughter who let the family down. I became the wedding bank of Olivia. I transferred deposits for the estate, the Briarcliff Manor. I authorized payments to the florist who used orchids flown in from Thailand. I covered the cost of the custom Tom Ford tuxedo. It's an investment piece, Liv. Leo had said. I paid for the open bar that featured a signature cocktail named Mia's Moonlight that required artisanal small-batch gin. I funded the bridal shower at the plaza, which I was also too informal to help plan, according to Mia's mother, Celeste. I covered the rehearsal dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant where I was seated at the far end of the table, next to Mia's great-aunt's nurse. Every invoice, every tearful call from my mother, the harpist doubled her fee. Every text from Leo, Liv, the cake designer needs the final payment. She's kinda a diva LOL, was a withdrawal from my savings, my sanity, my sense of self. I worked late, took on extra consulting projects, and postponed my own dream of buying a cottage upstate. My boyfriend, Mark, a kind and fiercely pragmatic engineer, watched in horrified silence. It's a bottomless pit, Liv. They're using you, he'd say. It's for family. I'd reply, the family mantra a shield against his logic. I was invited, of course. I was the maid of honor's older sister, a vague, respectable relation. Mia had 8 bridesmaids, all childhood friends from boarding school, a shimmering phalanx of blondness and trust funds. My role was financial, not ceremonial. I understood. I didn't have the right pedigree, the right effortless glamour. I bought my dress off the rack at Nordstrom and had it tailored. It was navy blue, not the mandatory blush chiffon. A quiet, subtle rebellion. And now, 3 days before the wedding I had bought, I was being uninvited. Politely, gently, because my presence, in my off-the-rack navy dress, might not be my scene. Might clash with the imported orchids and the Tom Ford tuxedos. No hard feelings. I stood up from the conference table, my legs steady, my mind a crystal clear, frozen lake. I walked back to my corner office, closed the door, and sat down. I didn't cry. I opened a new spreadsheet. I began to tabulate. Not just the big-ticket items. Everything. The Briarcliff Manor deposit, $25,000. Orchestra, $12,000. Flowers, $18,500. Catering, $22,000. Leo's tux, $6,000. Mia's something extra hair and makeup trial for her and her mother that I'd covered in a moment of weakness, $1,200. The emergency payment for the custom wedding rings when Leo maxed out his credit card for $1,800. The bailout for my parents' contribution they couldn't actually make, $5,000. The flight and hotel for Annie Ling from Taiwan, because Mom said it would look bad if we didn't fly her first class, $9,923. Line by line, invoice by invoice, bank transfer by bank transfer. I pulled up every email, every scanned receipt, every Venmo notation for wedding stuff. I worked with the cold, precise focus I used for corporate audits. This was a forensic accounting of my own betrayal. The total, to the dollar, $86,423. I stared at the number. It was obscene. It was a down payment on a life. It was the price of my silence, my compliance, my love. Mark found me there hours later, the sky outside my window dark. Liv, you okay? You missed your workout. I turned the screen to him. He read the text, then his eyes dropped to the spreadsheet total. His face, usually so calm, flushed with anger. Oh, hell no. I'm not going to the wedding, I said, my voice eerily calm. Damn right you're not. You're going to send them this. He pointed to the spreadsheet. A wild, terrifying idea began to form. Not of revenge, but of reckoning. Of making the invisible, visible. Of presenting the bill for all of it. Not just the money, but the emotional overhead. The years of being the afterthought, the human safety net. No, I said, a slow smile touching my lips. It felt strange, like using a forgotten muscle. I'm going to do something else. I spent the next 2 days executing my plan with the efficiency of a military campaign. I canceled the check I'd written for the final venue payment, which was due the day before the wedding. I called the caterer, identifying myself as the wedding's financial coordinator, not a lie, and informed them there was a hold on all further payments pending a family review. I contacted the florist, the orchestra leader, the transportation company. I was polite, professional, and firm. There's been a financial discrepancy. All disbursements are paused until Monday. I didn't lie. I just stopped the flow of funds. Then, I created a document. Not a spreadsheet. A formal invoice. On my company letterhead. It was a work of art. From Olivia Chun. To Leonardo Chun and Mia Harrington Chun. Invoice number 001. Wedding services and associated costs. It listed every item, line by line, with date, description, and amount. At the bottom, the bold total, $86,423. Below that, I added a section, Terms and Conditions. Payment due in full upon receipt. This invoice represents tangible expenditures for goods and services rendered. Intangible contributions, emotional labor, familial pressure, strategic guilt absorption, are billed at a rate of $0, as their value was apparently also $0 to the recipients. Note, no hard feelings is not a legally binding form of currency. Payment in full is required. I saved it as a PDF. Then, I packed a bag. Not for a wedding. For a spa weekend Mark had booked for us months ago, a surprise I'd said I couldn't afford because of the wedding. I could afford it now. On Friday, the day before the wedding, as the family would be arriving at the Briarcliff, rehearsing, and panicking about final payments, I hit send. I emailed the invoice to Leo, to Mia, to my parents, and, for good measure, to Celeste and Arthur Harrington. I texted the PDF to Leo and my parents in a group chat. Then I turned my phone off. Mark and I drove north to a quiet inn in the Berkshires. We hiked, got massages, ate delicious food, and didn't talk about my family. I felt lighter than I had in years, a strange, buoyant sensation of having jumped off a cliff and discovered I could fly. I turned my phone on Sunday evening as we drove home. The voicemail box was a monument to hysterics. My mother, sobbing. Olivia, what have you done? The caterer is refusing to serve. The flowers are held at the gate. The Harringtons are furious. Leo is devastated. Call me now. My father, stern and baffled. Liv, this isn't funny. This is your brother's wedding. Explain yourself. Leo, enraged. You unbelievable bitch. You ruined my wedding. You humiliated us. After everything we've done for you, I'll never forgive you. Mia, shrill. Olivia, this is legally actionable. My father is a partner at Harrington, Thorne and Crest. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. There were 57 missed calls. Over 100 texts. The family group chat had exploded into a war zone of accusations, demands, and screenshots of the invoice, which had apparently been forwarded to various relatives, who were now weighing in with shock and morbid fascination. I scrolled, my heart a steady drum. I felt nothing but a profound, weary peace. I didn't respond. Not that night. Not the next day. I went to work. I focused on my projects. I was a sea of calm in the eye of their hurricane. On Tuesday, a certified letter arrived at my office from Harrington, Thorne and Crest. It was a cease and desist, demanding I retract the fraudulent and defamatory invoice and issue a formal apology to the Harrington and Chin families for the malicious disruption of the wedding. I handed it to Mark, who laughed. Their lawyer is an idiot. It's an invoice, not a defamatory statement. It's a list of facts. That afternoon, I finally responded. I emailed all parties, including the Harrington's lawyer. Dear all, thank you for your correspondence regarding invoice number 001. The figures contained therein are accurate and verifiable via bank records and vendor contracts. I have undertaken a full audit and stand by the total. As the primary financier of the event, I exercised my right to pause disbursements upon being formally disinvited from the occasion. My understanding was that my financial involvement was no longer required, as my presence was deemed incongruent with the event's tone. I am willing to discuss a payment plan for the outstanding balance of $86,423. A 5% monthly interest rate will be applied to any unpaid balance, consistent with standard commercial practices. Please direct all further communication on this matter to my legal representative, whose details are below. Sincerely, Olivia Chun. I had no legal representative, but Mark's brother was a lawyer, and he agreed to let me use his name and a dummy email for the bluff. It was glorious. The wedding, I later pieced together from furious relatives and social media posts that were hastily deleted, had been a scaled-back disaster. The Harringtons, in a rage, had covered the immediate costs to avoid social annihilation, but the clear-top tent was half empty because the late-notice caterer could only provide cold sandwiches and a cash bar. The orchestra played, but the harpist refused to go on without her final check. My parents sat in shame at a table in the corner. Leo and Mia had a bitter, whispered fight in the middle of their first dance and left the reception early. My parents showed up at my apartment that weekend. They looked old, deflated. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. How could you, Olivia? She whispered. We're family. Yes, I said, not inviting them in. We are. And for years, family has meant I give and Leo takes. I work and he dreams. I am responsible and he is indulged. You asked me for $86,000 for his happiness, and then he told me not to come because I wouldn't fit in. So I presented the bill. That's what family means to me now. A settled account. My father looked at the floor. We didn't know it was that much. We thought you were just helping. You didn't ask, I said softly. You never do. You just assumed that easy child can handle it. Well, I can't. And I won't anymore. They left. The silence that followed wasn't the oppressive silence of my childhood, of swallowed words and unmet needs. It was my silence. Chosen. Powerful. Leo never paid the invoice, of course. The Harringtons threatened legal action for a while, but when Mark's brother sent a countersuit draft for unjust enrichment and emotional distress, complete with a timeline of financial abuse, they went quiet. The social embarrassment was worse for them than the money. I didn't get my $86,423 back, but I got something infinitely more valuable. I got my life back. I bought the cottage upstate with Mark. I started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned in college because it wasn't practical. I go to therapy to unravel the knots of obligation they tied around my heart. Sometimes, I see pictures on social media of Leo and Mia. They live in a condo the Harringtons bought them. He doesn't play music much anymore. She looks tired. They never speak of the wedding. My relationship with my parents is a quiet, distant thing. Polite calls on birthdays. They don't ask for anything. I don't offer. It's a ceasefire built on the rubble of the old family dynamic. I keep a printed copy of the invoice in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of the money, but as a monument to the day I stopped being a line item in someone else's budget. The day I sent a bill for my own worth, and even though it was never paid in cash, it was paid in full in the currency of self-respect. They told me not to worry about coming to the wedding. They were right. I had better things to do, like finally showing up for myself.